Thank you. Thank you very much. Dear esteemed guests, fellow delegates, and faith leaders, it is my honor to be with you today to address the suppression of religious freedom, which has had a critical impact in so many of the world's societies. Former President Václav Havel understood this very well. He understood the power of the human spirit in building resilience and in coping with the injustice and cruelties of oppressive political regimes. He spoke about the singular, explosive, incalculable political power of living within the truth as a means of surviving oppression. As I prepared today's speech, I was very moved as I recalled in my 20s, my early 20s, the memory of His Holiness the Dalai Lama's first visit to the newly founded Czech Republic at the invitation of former President Václav Havel. It was a political and cultural milestone for all of us to witness the visit of the Dalai Lama as one of the early significant acts as a newly liberated country. Since then, His Holiness the Dalai Lama has visited the Czech Republic at least 10 times, twice since the passing of former President Václav Havel, as a participant in conferences and meetings within the framework of Forum 2000. They were so close that the Dalai Lama even traveled to be with him a week before the passing of former President Havel. I'm speaking to you today from my perspective as a Tulku. In other words, in the Buddhist tradition, a reincarnation of a High Lama. I'm of Kalmyk heritage. I was born in America. I was fortunate to receive a monastic education in a Tibetan refugee monastery in India under the guidance of other Tibetan lamas, precious teachers who have given me extensive training in Buddhist philosophy and practice. These institutions were re-established in exile by Tibetan refugees as a means to preserve and promote Buddhist education, Tibetan language, and culture, as well as to protect the religious lineage. This was all made possible thanks to the visionary leadership of His Holiness the 14th Dalai Lama. Just before the collapse of the Soviet Union in 1991, I had an honor to be part of His Holiness the Dalai Lama's first visit to the Republic of Kalmykia, a region in the Russian Federation whose once rich Buddhist heritage was destroyed by Soviet communist policies and severely impacted the community with the forced deportation of the Kalmyk people to Siberia. I recall His Holiness the Dalai Lama saying to a journalist before his departure from Kalmykia, the Dalai Lama said, "The people of Tibet and Kalmykia are like twin brothers and sisters who have suffered tremendously under the rule of totalitarianism." In 1992, I was elected by the people of Kalmykia as the Shajin Lama, or Supreme Lama of the Kalmyk people. As their spiritual leader, my role was to lead a Buddhist revival among the approximately 160,000 Kalmyks who live in Kalmykia. Many years later, I was appointed to the role of representative of His Holiness the Dalai Lama to the Office of Tibet based in Moscow. And I have served in this capacity both as a representative of His Holiness the Dalai Lama and also mainly to help cultivate Buddhist education and support the traditionally Buddhist republics in the Russian Federation, such as Kalmykia, Buryatia, and Tuva, to reconnect with their Buddhist heritage and identity. From a personal experience, I have found that it is vital for religious leaders and spiritual educators to actively engage to help cultivate the conditions of a free society where religious and spiritual freedoms are allowed. His Holiness the Dalai Lama has promoted a concept called secular ethics, and I'm sure Professor Thomas is very much familiar as he had many occasions to have dialogue and engage in a very warm and friendly friendship with His Holiness the Dalai Lama. His Holiness the Dalai Lama has promoted the concept of secular ethics, the importance of kindness and compassion, and has engaged with scientists and world leaders on the pressing issue of our time. From his example, we see that it is not enough only to engage with those who share the same religious faith. His Holiness the Dalai Lama has always said that prayers alone are not sufficient enough. We must engage with those who have different beliefs, as well as those who have no religious beliefs. Buddhism is a culture and philosophy, and not only a religion. Those human values of kindness, compassion, and wisdom are the foundation of a healthy society. Destroying those values creates harm and immense danger to our world. China has an agenda to Sinization in Tibet with an objective of breaking and reshaping Tibetan Buddhism and eradicating distinctive Tibetan identity. Their methods of control involve methods of high-tech surveillance and control over monasteries and lay society. Now, the Tibetan Buddhism is being preserved and protected in exile abroad from Tibet in schools and monasteries, but also by brave Tibetans inside the PRC who continue to protect the core values of our spiritual civilization against all odds. The invasion and occupation of Tibet disrupted peace and stability in the region, not only in Tibet, but in the region. The 1964 war between China and India came 3 years after His Holiness the Dalai Lama came into exile in India. The Dalai Lama's vision for a Tibet as a zone of peace with its fragile high altitude landscape protected and preserved for the sake of the world would transform not only the lives of Tibetans in Tibet, but also far beyond its borders across the Himalayas, such as Nepal, Bhutan, and the entire region, including Mongolia and Russia, and many regions such as Kalmykia, where I come from. From the moment that Mao Zedong declared that to the young Dalai Lama that religion is poison, there have been systematic efforts to target Tibetans' spiritual culture. Before and during the Cultural Revolution, thousands of monasteries were destroyed and religious texts burnt. Great religious teachers were imprisoned and forced to undergo hard labor. Today, even mild expressions of Tibetan culture identity are criminalized. Draconian new regulations target Tibetans engaged in environmental protection of community initiatives, such as helping the poor and homeless, burning of incense as an offering to the Buddhas, displaying prayer flags, and simply possessing an image or a photo of His Holiness the Dalai Lama can result in imprisonment. And often monks even prevented them prevented from making prayers for the deceased. Even aside from causing such human suffering, this jeopardizes the very foundation of a stable society. Tibetan Buddhist civilization has always reached beyond its high plateau. Its influence is strong across the Indian and Nepalese Himalayas, in Mongolia, as well as in Russia and Central Asia, and traditionally Buddhist countries such as Japan and many others. It will remain a vital force in Asia and across the world. It is a fundamental counterpoint to authoritarian and despotic leadership. It bolsters resilience in the face of oppressive forces seeking to divide our societies, to spread hate, to disrupt and change the world order. The interference of the Chinese state with the practice of Tibetan Buddhists has also led to further complexities with Buddhist countries such as Mongolia, as well as Buddhist communities or Buddhist republics within the Russian Federation, such as Kalmykia, Buryatia, and Tuva. Mongolia, which is historically Buddhist, have also suffered immense religious repression and oppression under communism. Buddhism almost didn't survive the Stalinist purges of the 1930s, when thousands of monks were killed and taken across the border into Siberian gulags. This led to a massive decline in religious education and observance, as well as disintegrating of Buddhist and Mongolian culture identity. After the collapse of communism in 1990, Buddhism in Mongolia has experienced a slow but gradual revival throughout the country. The official Mongolian government policy states that the government does not administer or involve itself in religious affairs, as stated in the Constitution of Mongolia, which ensures the rights of the people to religious and non-religious beliefs. The revitalization of Buddhism in Russian republics, such as Buryatia, Kalmykia, and Tuva, has also been a painful but enriching process. As an example, in 2023, the 10th reincarnation of the Jibzan Damba Hotokdo, historically the highest Buddhist authority in Mongolia, was announced to the people of Mongolia, and the head of the main Mongolian Buddhist monastery, recently a new Khenpo Lama, or head of the Buddhists of Mongolia, was elected as due established religious process without any involvement of the government of Mongolia. As well as in 2023, the Pope Francis, the first of the Roman Catholic Church, made an official visit to Mongolia, which highlights the religious tolerance and freedom within Mongolia, despite the majority of its population adhere to Buddhism. Today, we are thankful to the visionary leadership of His Holiness, the 14th Dalai Lama of Tibet, whose efforts to preserve Tibetan Buddhist traditions in its extraordinary life in exile has enabled generations of Tibetans, Mongolians, and other Buddhists to study and practice, while also establishing monastic institutions, libraries, and educational systems that will grow as a Buddhist education continues to evolve. Three main points of concern that I have with the current state of continuous suppression of religious freedom in Tibet, which extend to Mongolia and to the Buddhist communities far beyond in Russian republics as well. One, the future recognition of the social and the future recognition and installation of the 15th Dalai Lama, and the political and social economic implications for Tibet, as well as Mongolia and other many Buddhists around the world. The suppression of Buddhist education and cultural identity of Tibetans, as well as Mongolians. 3, the suppression and control of monastic institutions and Buddhist communities. I'm saying this because China has gone as far as to infiltrate in Mongolian Buddhist affairs, not only Tibetans, but in Mongolian affairs, a sovereign, democratic nation. This is a perfect example, and this is an example that we must all be aware of and take into consideration. Mongolia is a landlocked country between two powerful nations, Russia and China. What Mongolian Buddhist faces now, with the recognition of a new spiritual leader, gives an insight to what Tibetans may face in the future. China has vehemently opposed any interaction between Mongolian Buddhists and the office of the Dalai Lama. Can you believe that? And a free democratic society, a free democratic world, a nation has a right to come into a sovereign country and give you instructions of who to communicate, what to believe, and whom to believe. That is something that it is totally unacceptable in modern day. The political and economic consequences are to be expected with consideration to China's economic sphere of influence and due to their positioning as Mongolia's most important economic partner, accounting for more than 80% of total exports, 60% of imports, and more than 40% of its GDP. The emergence of the 10th Bodhidharma reincarnation of Mongolia has given not only a high-profile spiritual leader, an important lineage holder of the Tibetan Buddhist tradition in the region of Mongolia, but also a precarious position amongst relations between Tibet and China. It also gives us great hope. China will undoubtedly attempt to install its own fake Dalai Lama when the time comes. But Tibetans, as well as followers of Tibetan Buddhist traditions of the Himalayan region in India, Nepal, Bhutan, Mongolia, and Russia will not accept this, will not accept a fake installed Dalai Lama by a regime such as China. The Tibetan Buddhist civilization has deep roots, and many energetic young teachers, monks, nuns, scholars, and Buddhists all over the world will only accept the truth based on history and lineage of Buddhism. I would like to conclude by mentioning that Tibetan Buddhism has had and will continue to have a transformative impact on the lives of millions of Tibetans, Mongolians, as well as Chinese and people around the world. I see three important areas where the international community needs to act. One, government must call on China to end the persecution of Tibetans exercising their right to freedom of religion or belief. The United Nations Human Rights Council's Universal Periodic Review of China in January 2024 is a good opportunity to speak up and share your concerns. Two, China must be made to understand of His Holiness the Dalai Lama himself, not the Chinese government. The sole concern of His Holiness the Dalai Lama, the Tibetan people, and the people who are historically linked to Tibetan Buddhism. Three, develop a better understanding of importance of inner Asia Asia, such as Tibet, Himalayan regions of India, Nepal, Bhutan, Mongolia, and Russia for peace and stability in Asia and across the globe, and support the Dalai Lama's plan for peace and stability for Tibet, as well as our global community. I end here with humble and sincere thanks to the Czech government for hosting us, bringing such wonderful people from various backgrounds and traditions in the wonderful city of Prague, and giving me an opportunity to share my thoughts with you. Thank you very much. Thank you very much.